Cuba, officially named the Republic of Cuba, is an island in the Caribbean. Havana is the largest city in Cuba and the country's capital. The United States sits north of Cuba as well as the Bahamas. Also, sitting west of Cuba is Mexico, and Jamaica sitting south of it. In 1492, Christopher Columbus landed on the island now occupied by Cuba for the Kingdom of Spain. Cuba remained Spain's territory until the Spanish-American War ended in 1898, and then they gained independence from the United States in 1902. It was a democracy increasingly dominated by radical politics, eventually evolved, and in 1940 Cuba had a constitution. It was eventually vetoed in 1952 by former President Fulgencio Batista, who intensified an already corrupt political repression and crippling economic regulations. Batista was overthrown in January 1959 and a new administration under Fidel Castro was brought in. By 1965 it had evolved into a single-party state under the Communist Party of Cuba, which to this day still holds power. Cuba is big for tourism, and that's how they make most of their money, while importing a large percent of their food and some other goods. Cuba, on the other hand, is a pretty diverse place. It's made up of about 65% white, 10% African, 25% mestizo, or in other words, people with mixed backgrounds. This has caused a lot of problems, like the Cuban Revolution, led by former leader Fidel Castro. On December 2, 1956, Castro led his men into Cuba to fight Batista's men and try and overthrow him. Fidel Castro's men entered the capital on January 8, 1959. Shortly after, Castro became prime minister in February 1959, succeeding Jose Miro in head of state. Then from 1959 to 1966, Castro and his men fought in a 6-year rebellion. The rebellion was eventually crushed by the government's use of superior numbers. By the end of the 1960s, Castro had all radio and television stations in state's control. Moderate teachers and professors were removed, and about 20,000 dissenters were imprisoned. Also, Castro had some homosexuals, religious people, and others sent to labor camps where they were subjected to political, quote-unquote, re-education. The U.S. State Department estimates that 3,200 people were executed from 1959 to 1962. The Communist Party strengthened its one-party rule with Castro as its ultimate leader. Since rule, more than 1 million Cubans of all social classes have left the island. There has also been many Cubans who have attempted to leave, but have died trying. Recently, however, in February 2008, Fidel Castro announced his resignation as president of Cuba, and on February 24th, Raul Castro, his brother, was elected as Cuba's new president. In his first speech as president, Raul promised that some of the restrictions that limit Cubans' daily lives would be removed. In March 2009, Raul Castro moved some of his brother Fidel's officials. Cuba recently, however, is striving to take away some policies left by Raul's brother Fidel and relieve some tension it has had for a while. Cuba is also part of the flat world in a big way through trading for goods, and they have a huge market in tourism, and I believe Cuba has come a long way from where it was in the past decades. Recently, however, Cuba has had to deal with the disasters left by Hurricane Sandy. The superstorm killed at least 21 people around the area. Cuba has also had to deal with the UK because they will not let one of their citizens go. A young African male named Yandere De Paz, known as Yogi to the rest of the world, who was born in Cuba but moved to the UK, came back to help his mother prepare for the storm, Sandy. After the storm, he tried to leave, but Cuban officials would not let him because they said he did not have the right documents. This is because Cuba does not recognize dual nationality, and Mr. De Paz needs a Cuban passport to travel in and out of the country. So for now, he's staying with his mother in her one-room home until he gets the right documents. Even though Cuba has had its ups and downs and is always involved in something, it is doing its very best to move up in the world and become more developed both technologically and economically.